Welcome, welcome. Love to see you here this Tuesday lunch. So today we're delighted to have Otfried here, Otfried Czaika. Most of you will know the setup. Otfried speaks for 13 minutes. We have a discussion or question and answers for about 13 minutes. And the topic of today, it's a bit long, so I'll read it out. The migration of a Luthertext, how Luther's catechetical text from 1529 became the first Swedish children's Bible in the year 1600. So take it away, Otfried.
Thank you for this kind introduction. I think it would have been enough with just the migration of a Luthertext. Then we know what I'm doing, or probably could imagine that I'm doing some kind with texts floating during the 16th century through Europe. A little bit to the background of that, what will be probably, hopefully, a quite extensive book in the next 2 years. I may apologize to Olaf because he has heard last week at a PhD course something about that. But one background of that is that I, the last years, even has worked as a theological advisor for Bishop Sören Dalaby and Karlstad Bishopric in Sweden. He's a researcher himself, has researched children Bibles. And then during Corona, he issued own children Bible with marvelous images by a Swedish painter and artist, Marcus Gunnar Pettersson. And it sold very, very well in Sweden and even in Norway. That's Barnas Bibel. In Swedish, Barnens Besta Bibel. It's even translated to German. And I have read the original draft in Swedish. I've read the Norwegian translation. I've read the German because I should give advice, and so on and so on. So I was in some way fed up with children Bibles some years ago. But then Søren approached me and said, I have found, or you know probably, Otfried, that in the year 1600 we have the first Swedish children Bible, which in fact is a text written by Martin Luther in 1529. And we could do something because in 2026 we have 500 years of the first translation of the New Testament to Swedish, and then it's clear that there comes and follows even a children Bible in 1600. My problem was that I started digging into archives and digging into data and to old sources because it would have really fine just to work with this text from 1600 in Swedish and make some addition or something like that. But I thought it's quite fuzzy. I want to know more about this text from 1600 and that what is considered as the first children Bible. When we go back to the history of this children Bible, which is even available in the 16th century in Danish, for example, or in German, in High German and Low German, we have to go to the year 1522, when Martin Luther issues the first version of his prayer book. And this prayer book does not contain this children Bible. It contains a preface, explanations of the Ten Commandments, explanation of the Creed, of Our Father, of Ave Maria, some Psalms, and Paul's letter to Titus. 7 years after this first version, Martin Luther issues a second extended version of his prayer book. And there we have, as the last text in this prayer book of 1529, this so-called Passional or Children's Bible, giving 50 stories from the Old and New Testament with woodcuts and short excerpt from the Bible text, often just one verse and then etc. So I could find then the first one, 1529, and the Swedish version, and I was trying to figure out what happened between 1529 or 22, 29 and 1600 when we meet this text in Swedish. The problem is that I really started digging into archives and not only went to the edition of Martin Luther's works, the so-called Weimarer Ausgabe, because there is an edition which has taken account to all editions during Martin Luther's lifetime. He died 1546, and merged it into one text. There, this Children's Bible is very uninteresting because the edition has no woodcuts, so it's just some verses from the Bible, and you might think that's a crazy person who just writes some verses on the Bible if you see the printed edition. So I wanted to know what happened with this text during the 16th century. How became it a part of the prayer book? How was it, so to say, cut off from the prayer book? And what I come through is a total mess in the end, because I have found both from Martin Luther's lifetime and the time after Martin Luther's death, around 120 different versions, only in German and Low German, from this Prayer Book 1, Prayer Book 2, or this Children's Bible. So in some way, we have something which is branded through an edition or later research as a text. But when we go back to the sources, we see this is not really a text. It's a living text, which is altered and changed all the time. What the nice thing is that we do not only have those around 120 high and low German versions of the prayer book and or the Passional, we even have around 50 versions in other languages, in other European languages, e.g. Or in French, in Netherlands, and Danish, in Latin, and in Swedish. And what we can see is that all the time, when the text is printed, something happens with the text. It's not the same text in the end. You may change the woodcuts. You take another artist for the woodcuts, and then you change as well the interdependence between text and images. But often you just cut off something from the text, or you extend the text. For example, we find in Germany after Martin Luther's death, it's quite normal that we print this Children's Bible as an own text, but we have not only the woodcut and a Bible verse, we have even a prayer on the same page. So the question is here, who has written the prayers? Why? What happens with the text if you now have Luther's preface to the Children's Bible, but the prayers are not Luther, so you get some canonical Lutheran text, which is not Luther, into the text. Or sometimes you have no author in the publications, so it's not branded Luther. You can brand it, that you often do in Germany, as a Luthertext, but in France or in the Netherlands and Denmark, you do not brand it during the 1520s, 30s, and so on as a Martin Luther text. So what happens with the text if you brand it with the Reformer or without the Reformer, if you have additions to the text, if you put it together in an anthology, for example, what as well happens after Martin Luther's death, and so on. So in the end, understanding what this text from 1600 or the original Luther text from 1529 or 1522 is, that we in the end have to understand what happens to a text. And then we may understand that we cannot longer so easily, as researchers normally do, talk about the text, or a text as something which is editable, because those 170 representation of Martin Luther's prayer book Passional text are not longer in some way editable. It would be a total mess. Because then they are cut off the entire Old Testament and some prints, for example, and only given the New Testament and the Genesis, for example. So what we have to take into account that when we read research, when we often write by our own research, there is written something, Luther wrote this text, and all other wrote say, oh yes, we know the prayer book. But people in the 16th century had different texts on the tables at home. We're reading different texts. So we have made in some way ex post ghost understanding of what this Luthertext or another canonical text from historical times may be. However, what is quite nice is that I am able to unveil some cornerstones. They are, on the one hand, language, the chronological timeline, and geographical distance. What I can see in the German-speaking parts of Europe, until Martin Luther's death, the reception of what his prayer book is very stable. There are some crazy things, but mostly the text is very stable until Martin Luther's death. When Martin Luther is dead, then there came printers and editors from the entire German-speaking Europe and rip off something here, put it in there and take it, have extensions and amendments. So the name of Martin Luther seems to make a quite stable text until he dies. But then it's just exploding even in Germany. We can even see that if the text already in the 1520s and 30s moves to other languages, as for example French, Netherlands or Danish, then you are very, very free to do what you want. So we have Danish editions of this children's Bible, which are the first which edit it as an own text, as an own object, already 1513. But they cut off nearby the entire Old Testament. So Danish get a children's Bible, 1530, already as an own print, as an own work, so to say, but without the Old Testament. We see that the French can put it together with other texts. The first version of the Danish prayer book of 1522, which does not contain the children's Bible, is received in Denmark already in 1526 by a Catholic monk. Who does not give credit to Martin Luther as an author on the title page, but in the foreword. So there happens, if you go to another language, more things, or if you are after Martin Luther's death, or if you turn longer away from Wittenberg, then you already have some freedom even in Germany. So the first to put into the prayer book 1524 images, woodcuts, are printers in Augsburg and Nuremberg, and that's about 500 kilometers away from Wittenberg. So you see that there are at least three things which can describe those traces of how you may change a text and what can happen to a text. But in the end, what the findings of all those 170 different representations of a Martin Luther text through 80 years, because in 1604 we have the last time that we print Martin Luther's prayer book in the early modern period, and then we have the critical editions from around 1910. So what we can say here is that we always have to bound back what a text in the 16th century is to the artifacts, to the different versions we have, and that we in the end have a plentifulness of very many different versions, and that people during the 16th century meet a Luther text not that as something we consider a text today, which might be editable or printed in a facsimile or something like that, but in very, very many different versions. But that makes it as well very, very interesting for me, because I might go for how a text is merged, changed, widened, and so on, and how it travels from one geographical area or from one language to another language. And that means in the end, even though things are changing all the time, there's something common here in the 16th century, and that makes that we in many parts of Europe share a common history. We share texts and we use them and we alter them. I think I have to stop here.
Thank you very much, Otfried. Thanks.